So this one needs no introduction, but I gotta do one anyways. We're looking at a metroidvania today and probably one of the most recognizable Touhou fangames out there. Touhou Luna Nights, developed by Team Ladybug and released in February of 2019. Well, that's when the full version dropped anyways. It was available a year before that as early access. That's when I had the chance to play it for the first time, and I remember thinking it was probably one of the best fangames ever, straight up. That is most certainly not the case today, but come on, a game with time stop as its main gimmick? A metroidvania at that? Oh, and you play as Sakuya, I guess. It's a really cool idea for a video game, how could I not be excited for it? And besides, the metroidvania genre is basically uncharted territory for Touhou fangames. The only ones I could find are the Boho series, yes, that's what it's called, and Touhou Double Focus. But I didn't know about those back then, so the idea of a Touhou metroidvania was something new to me. When the full version came out, I jumped on it right away, played through it again, and still had a lot of fun. Even got all the achievements, which aren't really all that hard, but hey, it's something to do. But with every playthrough after that, the issues this game has would become more and more apparent. We'll get to those in due time though. For now, let's take it from the top. The story goes that Remille has trapped Sakuya in a recreation of the Scarlet Devil Mansion as part of a game. You know, classic Remy stuff, and tells Sakuya to do her part and play along, with the caveat that she can't use her power over time. I love that Sakuya was completely unaware of all this. I mean, you all live in the same house. How do you not know? Anyways, she's still able to slow down time in this state, but after meeting with Nitori, she's offered a watch that can stop time, though only for a limited amount of time. Don't think about it too hard, okay? Time is fake anyways. With that, we're free to begin the game proper. This is your usual metroidvania, exploring the mansion and leveling up, finding secrets leading to various upgrades, defeating bosses that block your path, and getting items that let you progress to different areas. One thing right off the bat is that I'm a big fan of the sleek style this game goes for, with very detailed pixel art and surprisingly smooth animations. I can only assume that must have taken a while to get right. I love how in the very first screens you can see the Hakurei shrine over a hill in the background, or how slowing down time also slows down the rain. I didn't even notice that my first time around, believe it or not. For as much praise as I can give the visuals, and really it does look great, I think it fits the game's vibe pretty well. But if you look at other of Team Ladybug's games, they can seem a bit similar in some areas. I haven't really played any of those, and honestly I don't care about reusing assets if it's done right, but my point is that it's a shame it's not unique to this game like I originally thought. But let's go back to the game. Sakuya keeps her trusty knives as the main form of attack. They consume MP, which regens very slowly, but why wait when there are many ways to recover it? I mean, first of all, you can just pick them up if they hit a wall, that always works. Grazing is also a thing here of course, performed by getting close to an enemy or bullet without touching it, restoring some HP and MP as well as time, which we'll get to in a bit. I find that it has somewhat limited usefulness when navigating the mansion though. You're likely not gonna be getting close to enemies, and most of them don't shoot enough bullets to make it worthwhile. But for boss fights, grazing can be straight up broken in some bosses, where they have one attack that you can just quickly use to refill. You can also find these vending machines throughout the mansion, courtesy of Nitori again, where you can take a refreshing sip of unbranded soda drink to fully replenish yourself. Yeah sure, why the fuck not? Boy, I really wish it had that effect in real life. It's as easy as just walking past it too, same with saving the game, keeping the pace intact. The game also encourages recycling by giving you a trash bin to throw the can in. And let me tell you, these are some canned physics if I ever seen them. This thing bounces around so much. There is no reason to do it aside from an achievement and a whopping 10 gold each time, but I don't know, you could try to bounce it in if you want, I guess. Stopping time is the main deal in Luna Nights, which stops all enemies in place as long as you have time to spare. The meter goes down while it's in effect, and it speeds up considerably if you move or attack. Oh yeah, attacking in stop time consumes time instead of MP, but you're limited to how many knives you can throw here. Of course, the idea is to set up rows of knives that then go flying all at once when time resumes, which as you might have guessed, is a really powerful ability to have. Yeah, making time stop a balanced mechanic was never gonna happen. It can totally snap the game in half if you choose to abuse it. Really, nothing stops you from using it almost every room since it refills so quickly, and you can graze in stop time too, which has a bigger radius in exchange for being much weaker. I mean, I guess you can use it in water, and you can still get hit during it, which by the way, Sakuya flies like she got hit by a fucking truck whenever an enemy slightly touches her. Seriously, I know this draws a lot from Castlevania, but this knockback is insane. The counter-argument to time stop being a broken ability is that it's also really fun to use. Just setting up a wall of pain and then just instantly deleting an enemy never gets old. It can break the pace a little bit though, notably in these hallways that are filled with enemies all the way, where I found myself stopping time every 2 steps. Of course, you could just choose to not use it at all, which makes for a slightly more challenging game, but ignoring what's literally the main gimmick of the game doesn't get rid of any of its issues. Slowing down time, which the game calls snail time, is the more balanced counterpart to time's up and it's just so irrelevant all in all. There is nothing it can do that time's up can already do better, and you get the watch from Nitori after about 5 minutes of gameplay if you don't wander around. Well, you can still go through water, I guess. That's actually used for some puzzles around the mansion. It can probably save you in a pinch, but unless it was needed for navigation or the one time you kinda have to use it in a boss fight, I just almost never use snail time. Sakuya also has access to various skills, which you get from these cards you find around the mansion. Skill cards, not to be confused with spell cards. From knives that home in on enemies, to a shield that hurts everything around you. These all have a situation where they shine, but honestly none of them compare to the chainsaw, which you actually find very early on in the second area. And to understand why it's the best, all you gotta do is look up. If they're not already flying, most of the time enemies are gonna be positioned above you. I mean, you are climbing up the mansion after all. And the chainsaw is the only skill that covers that direction, being thrown in an arc similar to the axe in Castlevania. This applies even for bosses. Like, Milling is the first boss you encounter, right? Before you even get this skill, mind you, and she's one of 2 bosses in the whole game that aren't up in the air 90% of the time. Also, you're tossing a fucking chainsaw. Sakuya conjures a chainsaw out of thin air and throws the damn thing. I guess anything is a knife as long as it does the cutting part. Oh yeah, there's also a shop, which you can access at any time by going back to Nitori. You can sell all the gems you get from enemies in exchange for gold, which you can then use to buy items. That's a bit of a roundabout way of doing it. But why would I wanna give them my gems in the first place? They all give Sakuya a little boost that, at least I like to think add up once you have many of them. There better be some top tier items on sale to make me give these up. Well, there is not a lot of variety here. I personally never had to use any of these. Grazing does the restoring part pretty good during boss fights as I mentioned earlier, and for navigation, well, the next vending machine is usually not very far away. MP is the one thing that I found myself running low on sometimes, but even then in those situations I just attacked in stop time, which doesn't use MP. Aside from the item cards, you have upgrades to both your time and the amount of knives you can throw in stop time. These are both things that you can already find plenty of hidden throughout the mansion, getting even more would just be overkill. 100,000 for EXP? I could barely get like half of that with the gems I had after completing the game. So yeah, all in all, the shop was pretty worthless for me. And you get reminded of it so many times throughout the game. Even get these shop cards that can summon Nitori at any time. She's really persistent about wanting you to use her. Don't say it like that. So Sakuya makes her way through the mansion, fighting Marisa and Patchouli along the way, getting some hints that something might not be right. No idea what the hell this was about though. Finally reaching the clock tower for a climatic showdown with Rumilia. This game obviously takes a lot after Castlevania. There's gonna be a clock tower and I'm so glad. I always love how this area looks. The clock itself even displays your current time, which is a cool touch. Where's Death though? Where are the Medusa heads? Actually, never mind, no Medusa heads is fine. And look at this design, damn! I love this like exoskeleton Rumilia gets, that's metal as fuck. You can tell me she wouldn't totally use something like this. Anyways, once she goes down, the two finally decide it's about time to end this game, and with a snap of her fingers, everything does not go back to normal, as a voice announces that they have taken control of this world. Rumilia has a suspicion of who it could be, but Sakuya still has no idea, she's really out of it for this journey. Even in the next area you see these decorations with some peculiar wings. Does that ring a bell? No? Okay. Honestly, can't blame her, she was pulled into this against her will. I'd be very indifferent to the whole thing too. You can find the lost holy sword in this last area, which I assume is in reference to the sword familiar from Symphony of the Night. It's okay, but it is through your MP like it's nothing. It has another far more useful purpose though, and that is breaking hidden walls that lead to upgrades. So this is a good time to sweep through the mansion if you missed anything. This is especially easy to do because the pause screen has a checklist of all the items you can find in the game. It's even divided by area, and boy, I wish more games had something like this. It makes it so you at least know where to look and don't have to mindlessly wander around everywhere. Once ready for the final showdown, Sakuya goes into the throne room and finds... Nitori? What is she doing here? Well, I guess we're fighting Nitori now, in her kappa bag no less. After beating her, she has a bit of a meltdown and... What? It was Flandre the whole time? No way! Yeah, it gets pretty obvious. Even all the way back at the start of the game, you can see that it's raining, something Remy didn't anticipate, and if you remember that Patchouli made it rain in the OST to prevent Flandre from going out, well, you already know something's going on. But anyways, after transforming into a plane for her boss fight, she mentions that she's not very powerful because I didn't sell that many gems. Oh, so that's why she was so insistent on the shop. By the way, yes, I did try again after selling all my gems, and her comment does change to reflect that, but honestly I saw no difference in the fight itself. I don't know what's up with that. There is one detail about this that I don't wanna spoil, I really think you should experience it for yourself. Anyone that's played this, you know what I'm talking about. And let me tell you, the first time around, my jaw dropped to the floor when it happened. But anyways, after beating her, Flan says that she interfered with her sister's plan because she took all her gems and left her out of it. Wait, so these gems are yours? When did you get all these? Do they fall from your wings? Can you eat them? Vermillion promises to play with her in the future, where of course Sakuya will also be involved, and everything finally goes back to normal. For real this time. It's a pretty simple story as far as these characters go, and honestly, it didn't need to be more than that. Your usual, "Oh, I married my sister because she doesn't play with me" kinda shtick. I'm not someone who really minds wildly different characterizations, but one that always bugs me is Sakuya being put into this serious, sort of straight man act when well, she's really quite the character whenever she appears in the original series. Really, just read her chapter in Cola if you don't get what I mean. But I am used to it, I can enjoy it, it's not a deal breaker by any means. Also, I don't know where else to fit this, but the music is pretty good. I talked about the visual style of the game at the start of the video, and that same style extends to the music as well. A mix of traditional instruments with electronic sounds, which is always a great listen when it's done right. Needless to say, it's mostly arrangements of OST tracks, with some emphasis put into the ones related to Sakuya, like Lunar Clock, Luna Dial playing in the first area, which was always my preferred theme for her instead of Flowery Night. Has a bit more oomph to it, I think, though the latter obviously makes an appearance too. I think my highlight was, surprisingly, the Clock Tower theme, and a range of the Stage 6 theme from OST. And the reason it sticks out for me is that, out of the entire OST soundtrack, that's the one song you never see arrangements for. Understandable since it's so short, but it's nice to see it get some appreciation. It's a good song and sets that final stage mood perfectly both in the original game and here. Oh, but it's not over yet. After the ending, you can backtrack all the way to the first area to go for the extra route. And boy do I have some things to say about this one. So Nitori shows up, the real one, who apparently worked with the STM gals to make this world called Luna Nights. There is your title drop. She mentions that someone is trying to destroy this world, and if they succeed, everyone will be trapped inside of it. That's obviously a big no-no, so Sakuya's gonna stop it. This last area is as linear as the game gets. It's pretty much a straight path from A to B, with the only detour being made to gate the Ice Megatama from... Oh hey, Chirno's here, as extra stage mid-boss no less. You go, Churro. Anyways, you get the thing, and it's used only here to get through these fires, not even needed to progress to the end. It's only required 2 rooms away where fire blocks the path to the dash. The dash. You know, the ability that you usually get very early on in any other game. What's the point of getting it now? It just makes you run faster, and it's one of those double tap to use, which means a lot of times I ended up dashing when I didn't want to. This whole section could have been avoided by just putting Chirno in a room along the way, and nothing would be missing honestly. Actually, that's kinda how it was in earlier versions of the game, funnily enough. The dash is only required a couple times, one of them to get to a hidden room with the bow knife, the last skill card in the game, and just... Why is this here? It's a cool skill, sure, but you only get it for this area, and you already have a pretty good arsenal by this point. I can tell you right now, it doesn't beat the chainsaw by any margin. Once you make it to the end, after this very long hallway that takes 2 years to get through, Sakuya encounters Reimu, who is the one trying to get rid of all this because it's messing up the real world. This is honestly a pretty fun boss fight, and her 2 phases require totally different approaches. By that I mean 1000 daggers for the first one, abusing the hell out of that invincibility, and chainsaw for the second. PC98 Reimu shows up too. I like how you can see the sprite fading in and out during this attack. Once she goes down, everyone else finally shows up, and things basically play out the same as in the normal ending, except this time Revelia mentions that she made this world for Flandre, so she could play around without fear destroying everything. But it's already reached its limit and is now collapsing, so everyone just flies away, leaving Sakuya behind since, you know, her powers were sealed. But thanks to Flang leaving the Kappa back behind, she can make her escape. I'm not a big fan of the extra chapter. Sure, it's challenging, and the 2 included boss fights are really cool, but it just feels like it was sloppily put together as an afterthought. To respect the formula of the Touhou games, maybe. Stuff is shoehorned into it when it could be placed in other parts of the mansion, something that would make for a more natural extension of gameplay time. And even though it's not that long, it just feels like it drags on. Some of the enemies can be really tanky. Why do these fish take like a million hits? There were some sections that made me consider just stopping time and waltzing my way through the room, but you gotta get those enemies for that sweet experience and gems. Even when it comes to the story, I prefer the normal ending. It wraps up everything nicely and makes for a much more climatic finale, I think. I mentioned it being the most linear it gets, and that's in an already pretty linear game. There's always a single path laid in front of you with no way to get around it and, honestly, not much exploration to do. Almost can feel like a traditional level-based platformer at times. But I don't think it's particularly a bad thing in this case. In fact, I think it's more likely the natural result of this game being so small. Seriously, this is a full map. This game is microscopic when compared to other indie metroidvanias, and you can really feel it in repeated playthroughs. But it manages pretty well despite that, proving once again that size isn't everything. Every area feels different from one another and brings its own challenges with it. Well, except the library, that was kinda dull. The level design makes good use of Sakuya's abilities, and even though it never gets that deep, it is enough to keep the game from becoming stale. All the different enemies help keep things interesting too. They're a nice break from the usual fodder you see in Touhou Fangames, though fairies are still here and... wait, they have guns? Who gave these fairies guns? They can't even read! Oh hi Metroids. There is a boss rush mode unlocked after beating the extra route. This seems to be a trend so far. You gotta go back to Nitori to access it and... oh god. It's what you'd expect, something neat to do once everything's done. You know what's interesting about it though? Chirno doesn't show up here. She was added to the game in a very late update, way after the game was finished, and... I guess they just didn't bother with putting her in boss rush. Kinda odd, but okay. Sorry Churro, guess you can't win them all. Despite its shortcomings, I think Luna Nights is still a very solid fan game and well deserving of the attention it gets. It's definitely not very strong as a metroidvania, but if there's one thing that hasn't changed from my initial thoughts years ago, is that I still had a lot of fun with it. If you haven't played it already, I'd say you're missing out on a really good time. It's got some unique elements that are very fun to play around with, along with level design that makes good use of them. And it isn't very long, you can probably get through it in like 1 or 2 sittings. Short and sweet. I wouldn't call it the best as I used to think, there is another fangame that gets that spot from me nowadays. I hope I can talk about that one someday. But it's always nice to go back for a quick run of the mansion. I'd still consider this game part of the quintessential Touhou fangame experience, whatever that is. And hey, if it helped introduce some people to the series, well, all the better for it. So funny story about this one, I had a couple setbacks due to having to reinstall Windows on my PC because I was having issues with the next game I wanted to cover. And well, in the process of migrating files, I forgot the project file for this video. Oops. I didn't have much done, so starting from scratch wasn't that big of a deal, but you know, still sucks. Aside from that, I also misplaced the footage for all the extra route stuff, so I had to speed through the game to record it again. This video did not want to get made. But anyways, that's gonna be it for now. Thank you all for watching and see you next stream.